All right, welcome to episode 28 of Red versus Blue. My name is Mike Stark.
And I'm Keith Curry.
We have been away for about a month, and a lot has taken place in the last month. However, none of it means anything because of what happened last night. Right, Keith?
Well, pretty much. I mean, everybody thought if, Trump's convicted, what is that going to do? Is his support going to erode? We don't know what he's going to be sentenced to. But at the end of the day, it looked like he lost very little in terms of the polls. And let's see what the polls look like after the debate, because I think they're going to look pretty better for Trump.
So your assessment of last night?
An unmitigated disaster for Joe Biden. Joe Biden had one job, was to look vigorous, to look presidential, to look like he was in control, and he was not old. And he failed on all of those in a spectacular faceplant fashion. Larry Sabato has called it the worst performance by a debater in any presidential debate ever.
Yeah, exactly. As a Democrat, I was blown away at how bad it was.
Let me share with you some comments from one of my Democratic friends on Facebook, live during the debate. She posted, "This is painful," with 3 periods. "Trump lies so much better than Biden speaks the truth." Here are the comments. "We need another Barack Obama. I'm going from a walk. It's bad. Exactamundo. Unfortunately, so true. It's a disaster for America and the free world. Agreed. I turned it off. I just can't watch anymore. We need for him to step aside and someone else to step in. It's the only way we can have any chance of beating this clown. Biden is over-rehearsed and can't answer anything off the cuff. Poor man is not fit to lead the country. Cringy. CNN has ceased to be a credible news outlet. Lack of moderation is criminal. This is a nightmare. Trump lied about everything, but it makes it sound like the truth. He's a much better speaker than Biden. I can barely understand what Biden is saying. We have to replace him. That's the best description I've seen. I don't think he lies well, but he stays on point like a broken record." It goes on like that.
Exactly.
And these are Democrats.
Right, exactly. I am under the impression that Donald Trump will be the next president of the United States. Tell me how that could change.
He's still got to be sentenced. He could be actually in jail or with an ankle bracelet. My bet is that he gets home detention in New York. The immunity decision is going to come down from the Supreme Court. And the fact that it's been held to the very last day for decisions is not, I think, a good sign for Biden. It's a good sign for Trump. And so it's probably going to be a muddled decision that will not allow the other criminal cases that justice has filed to move forward. So, that's a wild card. The biggest thing that could change the election, and this is what all of the Democratic wise men from Paul Begala to Jim Carville to David Axelrod have been saying now for months, is for the Democrats to get a new candidate, for Biden to voluntarily step aside and allow somebody else to be nominated at the convention. Now, here are some problems. Because of the fact that their dates conflict with state law in Ohio, they were going to have a Zoom call to nominate Biden in advance of the convention. Mm-hmm. That needs to be done before the 6th of August, so that there's maybe a month of play here. They actually did fix the problem legislatively in Ohio, but they didn't want to take any chances, so they were going to do that beforehand. So it's not even that you can wait till the convention to have somebody else. You got to get somebody else in the saddle now.
Right.
And the Democrats, you cannot have a standing start presidential campaign. You've got to gear up, you've got to raise money, you've got to, develop your staff and platform, et cetera. A lot of that, a new candidate could inherit for Biden, but, you've got to have your own thing. Now, here's the wild card. And David Axelrod made this point last night, is if the Democrats nominate just about anybody but Biden, and that's not true. There are some specific people who help and some that won't. Trump is in deep problem. For example, if the governor of Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro, is nominated for president, he is a mainstream Democrat, strong on Israel, representing a purple state who would definitely carry Pennsylvania in the election. Now, you'd have to get rid of Kamala Harris, and to do that without fracturing the party, you'd replace her with Michelle Obama. If you had a Shapiro-Obama ticket, I think the Democrats win the election. Similarly, I think if you had Nikki Haley or any other Republican, the Republicans would win. But, Biden has gone from being the guy running because he can beat Trump to being the only guy Trump can beat.
What kind of blowback is the Democratic Party going to take if they bypass Kamala Harris?
It depends on who they substitute. If it's Michelle Obama, not a win.
Really?
Yeah. If it's some white guy, if it's the governor of
Hmm.
Illinois or Colorado or somebody like that, it would be a significant blowback.
Wow.
And because there are identity politics, but Michelle Obama would make everybody forget about Camilla in a heartbeat.
Okay, well, I'm still standing by the fact that Donald Trump will be the next president of the United States. So, where do we go from now as a country to prepare for Donald Trump as president?
Well, I think the country is going to go through sort of the whole sequence of grief. There'll be denial, there'll be anger, there'll be acceptance, but it will be an ugly time in America. That will have significant impacts down the ticket, which probably weren't predicted before, but will be predicted now because people will simply not vote. It remains to be seen how much outreach Trump is going to have to moderate voters with his vice presidential pick. Democrats apparently fear most Marco Rubio. He may or may not be on the list. They both are from Florida, so there's a constitutional question. Trump would have to re-register in New York, which he probably doesn't want to do. So, there's still a lot of wild cards. And, we're still several months from the election. A lot can happen. The international situation is completely in flux in Ukraine and in Israel and South Asia. So a lot can happen. And don't underestimate Donald Trump's ability to blow himself up. I mean, he does that on a sort of regular basis. But I agree with you, Mike. If the election were held today, Trump would win. He's ahead in all of the battleground states. Virginia and Minnesota are now 2 points and 3 points, respectively. So he's within striking distance there, and he's making the map bigger for himself and smaller for Biden. And that's what the Democratic political pros have been saying now all the way back since really November. Biden, he can make a choice. He can be a statesman. It's a very hard thing to step back from a presidential nomination that you're on the cusp of getting. Maybe Obama can have a conversation with him. I don't know who he really trusts.
So I think there's a few things we want to cover in future episodes. First of all, we want to cover what's going on in Europe in the elections, because that has some effect on what goes on here, right?
Well, and it can be predictive. Everybody looked at Margaret Thatcher in 1979. She was the precursor for Ronald Reagan. Bill Clinton was the precursor for Tony Blair, where you have these generational changes in the politics there.
The other issue I want to cover, and we won't cover it today, is the Heritage Foundation's involvement in this election. You have been a supporter of the Heritage Foundation in the past. I trust that that isn't the case anymore. But they have this Project 2025 that we need to discuss. We'll discuss it on a future program. That could play a factor, too, because as we all know, Trump has no platform. If he's elected, he'll need a platform to be able to move forward, and they're standing at the sidelines ready to present that, right?
They are. And in 1980, of course, they did the same thing for Ronald Reagan, but those were mainstream conservative ideas that formed the basis of the Reagan Revolution. These ideas are Trump ideas. They are contrary to a lot of traditional conservative thought, and they're done by people who are sort of radical hangers-on from the Trump era. And they really focused on personnel and changing who is in government going forward, including kicking out a lot of the civil service people and the civil service protected people and replacing them with sycophants. And there's a lot of implications to American policy, to world policy. I'm back from Europe, and I'll tell you the people in Europe are watching this election just as close as we are because of the implications for world peace.
We're going to close it out. And again, next week, we may, as we move away from the debate and we can get some of the stats together and all of that, we may have a different view of what went on last night. I doubt it, but you never know. And there's a lot could go on in the next week. So we'll be back next week. But before we go, and I ask you this occasionally, and I'm going to ask you this too as we close out, as a Republican, a long-standing Republican, what are your emotions right now with what's going on?
Oh, I'm angry. I'm angry that the Republican Party has been turned into what it is, that 46 Republicans voted to defund NATO. Those people don't deserve to be in public office. And the idea that that would have ever happened, going all the way back to Eisenhower to today, is appalling. Whoever Vladimir Putin is paying to run this disinformation campaign in America, they are earning their money. Because the only people who celebrated last night were in the Kremlin and in Beijing. It was a sad and pathetic thing to watch as an American on both sides because, Trump didn't win the debate. Trump, lied and was disingenuous in many, many ways. He was just more coherent than Biden was, and Biden's primary job is to be coherent.
Right.
But the only people who are really celebrating the result of the debate are people in the Kremlin and people in Beijing. And the fact that the Republicans are no longer solidly a force to oppose that is disheartening and troubling and dangerous for the free world.
On that note, we will put things aside. We'll all take a deep breath, maybe have a drink or two,
I think that
and
would help.
and we will join you again next week for another episode of Red versus Blue.
Bye, everybody. Thanks.